Julie N. Villa. Double L equals Y.
Okay. I'm really excited because this is actually a cis story, so here we go. So something very different. So I have always loved science. When I was 14, I went to math camp. When I was 15, I went to engineering and science camp in the same summer. And so by 18, of course, I was an undergraduate at MIT. And walking around campus for the very first time, it was as though everybody was finally speaking in my exact love language. And I fell in love in the fall of my freshman year when a TA was talking about the research that her lab did. So I, of course, stayed after class and went down in the front and talked to her one-on-one. And then the next day I was talking to the professor, and he introduced me to what they were working on, which was this beautiful 11-atom compound called cisplatin. And so I then got a position working in their lab, and that meant that I taught myself the biochemistry that I needed to know, and also that I spent my nights and weekends and extra time in between classes in lab. Now, if you've never worked in a lab, they, in chemistry anyway, are usually windowless, highly air-conditioned. You wear a long coat and pants and like glasses that means you'll like never get a date. And so I spent all of this time working on this compound cisplatin, and I was trying to crystallize it. So all that meant is I took very tiny, microscopic, like pin-sized drops of liquids and tried to find the perfect conditions to make them form crystals. And this often would happen in either a cold room or a freezer. So like that's where I spent my free time at 18. And there were thousands of these drops. Like the affair continued for the better part of a year. I would go to class, go to parties, and then like disappear for a few hours and be sitting in the freezer, like staring through a microscope. And then eventually something else caught my attention and I moved on to another topic. So 40-year-old me, though, is now sitting in my oncologist's office, and I'm facing my second cancer diagnosis in 4 years. And there are two things that I know at this point. One, this time it's bone cancer, which, had that reaction for me. And the other thing is that the surgeons, the tumor was here in my face. So the surgeons are going to remove this part of my face and cut it off and replace it with a titanium plate. But that's a whole other story. So she and I are sitting there and we're talking, and she's telling me that this time the chemo was going to be much worse, much more aggressive, and I have to ready myself. And she tells me that the compound is going to be cisplatin. Yeah, so I'm very familiar with this, and I know the ass kicking that I'm ready for. I read those journals, right, when I was 18 years old, and I knew about the compound. And one day a nurse actually tells me that as I'm like looking kind of despondent in the chemo chair. She's like, yeah, Julianne, this is like an ass kicking worth of chemo. So to give you an idea about what it feels like when you get cisplatin, or in any way some of the results are, one, I lost all of the hair, not only on my head, but like my whole body, like baby smooth. I lost my fertility. I've never had a period since. I could not be in a room with this much noise because I had a constant ringing in my ears, which I still have. And I was dangerous in the kitchen because my hands and feet actually were so numb that I often tripped over my own feet and would mistakenly hold on to hot objects. So it became this weird sort of like Brokeback Mountain situation where it was like, I love you, but I hate you, and I can't quit you, and it would like knock me on my ass, and then 3 weeks later I'd have to like struggle through and kind of come back again because I knew that it was also at the same time saving my life. So after about 3 months of that, I did make it back into the hospital, and I went for surgery. I do have a face, so that, again, did actually happen. This is, titanium. It's all been redone. And then I'm at my brother's house recovering because at that time I just was like a hot mess and I could only walk with a cane and I had had a feeding tube and a whole bunch of other things. And the phone rings and it's my oncologist. And she tells me that the pathology has come back and that the cells are still growing. So those 3 months of chemo and all those side effects and all those things that I had been through week after week were for nothing. Never have I felt so unappreciated, that my efforts were more futile, and never have I had something that I loved so much leave me heartbroken. And so she explains that I have to go back and have different chemo. And I'd like to tell you about that, but the two main side effects of that chemo are, one, memory loss, and two, hallucinations. So I'm not really sure what happened over those 3 months. I locked myself in my friend's house with my keys in my pocket because I couldn't find them one day. And so just last week, I was at the oncologist, and it's now been about 4 years since I went through all that chemo. And she was, I'm fine. I actually now have a new oncologist, so I have a new oncologist, and, they're telling me I'm fine. But the scientist in me is incredibly unnerved because I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was the first chemo or the second chemo or the combination of those two, or if it's the green smoothies that I drink in the morning, or the fact that I'm a runner, or the fact that I just tolerate chemo really well. I really have no idea. I know that I'm lucky to be here and I know that I survived, but it just always sort of unsettles me as to, is there something that I can do to prevent, sort of a next time? What I do know is that I have sworn off all chemotherapeutic agents containing platinum. Like, no more abusive relationships where, I love you, but you're gonna kick my ass and take major things that I really care about from my life one way or the other. So no more platinum compounds of any kind. I do still love science though, because we do have great chemistry.